Alright. Alright, great apes, African apes, chimpanzees, simians, all you upright walking mammals. We're gonna do one last one. And this is gonna be, I did this video before, but it was a bunch of static. Something's wrong with this phone. There was a bunch of static in it. I know one of the other videos that had static, and if these last three had it, then oh well, I'm not gonna do them over. But I'm doing this one from one I did before, when I was saying this book, this graduate school book, has a like historical trace on of the history of linguistical history of biblical Hebrew. And I'm going to read some excerpts from this. And the reason why is because, you know, we advocate learning from academic and scholarly sources. Academic teachers, professors, scholars that hold doctorates. Because listening to people on Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, it's not the best choice, because people tend to get in their feelings and believe whatever sounds good. You know, as a man, I may have a girlfriend, I may have a woman, and my partner's like, yo, yeah, we seen your girl. I might not want to accept that truth, and eventually not accepting that truth can come back and hurt me in multiple ways. And not accepting the truth of people who's dedicated their life, whose job it is to learn these languages and to go out in the hot sun and dig these archaeological evidences and try to decipher them. It's gonna hurt you in the long run. It's gonna make you look bad. It's gonna stunt your growth. And I had to learn that the hard way. So, like I said, this is a graduate school textbook you can get on Amazon. That's why I got it. I'm just gonna read some excerpts. The history of Hebrew. It is one of the great ironies of Syro-Palestinian archaeology that vastly more documentation for what may be called the prehistory of biblical Hebrew has been found than for the history of the language at the time the scriptures were being recorded. So there's more pre-history evidence than it is evidence of the time that the scriptures were being written. Use of this documentation is difficult, both because the sources are of various types and because they are scattered over the whole range of the ancient Near East. These materials are recorded in a variety of scripts. In some cases, a single personal name contributes evidence of importance comparable to that of an entire literary text. A survey of these materials, best called Early Northeast Semitic (ENWS), is beyond the scope of this grammar, but a chronological review of major sources may be useful. Such a review makes it possible to sidestep the questions of exactly how many languages or dialects are involved and exactly how they are interrelated. So the late third millennial, 2350 to 2000. So this is when Sumerian and Egyptian writing was 100 years old, something 50 years old. Traces of early Northwest Semitics are could we call this proto-Semitics? Shemitics are found in cuneiform Sumerian and Akkadian texts from a variety of sites, perhaps including Ebla. So they're finding evidence of Proto-Semitic or early Northwest Semitic at this time in Sumerian and Akkadian texts. The Old Babylonian period, 200 to 160. 1,600. What am I talking about? Personal names in the Amorite language are found in texts from the Babylonian heartland, from the kingdom of Mari. Mari was a rich and powerful kingdom in the middle Euphrates Valley, and from other Syrian sites. The texts from Mari, written in Akkadian, also show common vocabulary of Amorite origin. Amorite names also occur in a series of excavation texts from 20th dynasty Egypt. So they're saying, they say Moses was an Amorite. As the text says, their mother was an Amorite. So these early Northwest Semitic Amorite names have been found in Mari texts and even in 5th Dynasty Egyptian texts. So late Middle Bronze, early late Bronze. The documentary evidence from this period is slender. Like I said over at the beginning, that there's more evidence in these times than in this time. It's slender, confined to the so-called Proto-Sinaitic texts written in the earliest form of the linear alphabet. So now we're getting into this form of writing. written in the earliest form of linear alphabet. These inscriptions found on the walls of Sarabit El Khadim, a turquoise mining area of the Sinai, are usually dated around 1475, although some scholars have proposed a higher date. Alphabetic signs are found on the jars from Gezer dated to the same period, and a few short texts have been found in Palestine. The Late Bronze Age, 1400 to 1200. There are a small number of alphabetic inscriptions from Syria, Palestine in the Late Bronze II period, but pride of place for early Northwest Semitic studies belongs to materials from Amarna, the Amarna letters, and Ugarit. The Egyptian city of Amarna yielded correspondence sent to the pharaohs Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten between 1400 and 1350, largely from the latter half of the period. These letters are written in a form of Akkadian, strongly influenced by the native Canaanites of early Northwest Semitic languages of the scribes, employees of the minor kings of Syro-Palestine city-states. The letters also contain Canaanite glosses. Among the larger of the petty kingdoms of the regions was Ugarit. It was preserved not only text written in the Akkadian, but also text written in the native language, Ugaritic. All right, the next page, Biblical Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew is the language of the Hebrew scriptures. The history of that language is bound together in part with the history of textual transmission. Other factors skewing a diachronic analysis of the language deserves a separate treatment. A variety of related languages and dialects more or less closely related to Hebrew were recorded at the time the Hebrew scriptures were being written. So when the Hebrew scriptures were being written, there were other Semitic languages being written down too. The Iron Age from 1200 to 540 BCE forms a convenient watershed in the history of Syro-Palestinian languages, though the significance of the year 1200 should not be exaggerated. The earliest biblical Hebrew had a great deal in common with Ugaritic and Amarna Canaanite. So just remember, the earliest biblical Hebrew had a great deal in common with Ugaritic. All right. The extra biblical linguistic material from the Iron Age is primarily epigraphic. That is, text written on hard materials, pottery, stones, walls, etc. The epigraphic texts from Israelite territory are written in Hebrew, in a form of the language which may be called inscriptional Hebrew. This dialect is not strikingly different from the Hebrew preserved in the Masoretic text. So look, the Masoretic text is preserving the Hebrew language of the Iron Age, which is closely related, had a great deal in common with Ugaritic. So you hear those, let's just say it, you hear those stupid Hebrew Israelites, those stupid Hebrew roots that say that the Masoretic text is corrupted the Hebrew language, and it's not, it's preserved it. Let's read it again. The epigraphic text from Israelite territory, in the Israelite territory, are written so the people that lived there wrote it in Hebrew in a form of language which may be called in scriptural Hebrew. This dialect is not strikingly different. It's not strikingly different from the Hebrew preserved in the Masoretic text. Unfortunately, it is meagerly attested. There's not a lot of it. Similarly limited are the epigraphic materials in the other South Canaanite dialects. Moabite, Amorite, Edomite is so poorly attested that we are not sure that it is a South Canaanite dialect, though that seems likely. Of greater interest, the bulk is the body of the Central Canaanite inscriptions, those written in the Phoenician language. All right, you see the Tyre, Sidon, Bisphyllos, and then the offshoot Punic and Neo-Punic tongues of the Phoenician colonies in North Africa. An especially problematic body of material is the Deir Allah wall inscription, referring to a prophet Balaam. These texts have both Canaanite and Aramaic features. So this guy, W.R. Garr, has recently proposed that all the Iron Age Canaanite dialects be regarded as forming a chain that actually includes the oldest forms of Aramaic as well. Just this one little part. Amorite was most closely related to Standard Phoenician. Edomite was related to Phoenician as well as to Hebrew. On this dialectical continuum, Hebrew lies closer to Standard Phoenician than it does Old Aramaic features. The Deir Allah dialect shared some features with Hebrew and Canaanite, but most of its phonological and morphological inventory was derived from Old Aramaic. Finally, Old Aramaic lies at the end of the continuum. Is that what I want to read? So Moabite is most closely related to Hebrew. We know on the Moabite stone, it refers to the Israelites. Linguistic affiliation is a comparatively minor issue in relation to the Iron Age epigraphic remains. They are a rich source of information about Canaanite morphology, the way you construct words, construct verbs, nouns, adjectives, syntax, your VSO, verb, subject, object, where you structure your sentences, structure your language, and literary usage, whatever model of dialect structure is accepted. All right, so what we've read is that there is sufficient evidence that these Shemitic languages were able to, as they studied them, as they found them, found that they were related, could decipher their morphology, phonology, the way they look, the way they sound, and the syntax, how to make sense of it all. And remember, it said early Hebrew, or biblical Hebrew, was most closely related to Ugaritic. So we're going to look at how Ugaritic, how its, most importantly, its phonology is, how it employed its vowels. I have a couple things I want to read. All right, Ugaritic represents better than any other second millennium language or literature that antecedents of the language and literature of ancient Israel. Like that book said, Ugaritic and Biblical Hebrew were right there. Same morphology, phonology. It is indeed difficult to underestimate the impact that the discovery of the Ugaritic text has had on the study of the Hebrew Bible. The culture and society of the Ugaritians were similar in many respects to those of the Canaanite who inhabited Palestine at the end of the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, the period purportedly described in the biblical books of Joshua, Judges, and Samuel. So, all right, these early books, the Ugaritians were not linguistically speaking Canaanites and did not consider themselves such an individual. Well, let's see. All right. The Ugaritic literary texts describe the world of the early West Semitic gods, El, Baal, Anat, and others. That was the matrix of which Israelite religion emerged. Epithets and characteristics of El and Baal in these texts are strikingly reminiscent of those ascribed to Yahweh in the biblical texts. The literary texts have also greatly influenced the way biblical poetry is read and understood, since biblical poetry is clearly part of the same literary traditions. All right. Let's jump here. Ugaritic vocabulary has contributed in many ways to our understanding of the Hebrew lexicon. An example is the identification of the new biblical Hebrew roots. It's at Hey Reshin, and the separation of the noun Harash, craftsman, originally Semitic root, from the root meaning to plow, on the reflexes of the Proto-Semitic consonants, Ugaritic, and in biblical Hebrew. All right, and just comparing the roots. I know you probably seen it. Among many biblical phrases that have been reinterpreted in the light of Ugaritic is Rokeh ba Arabot, Psalms 28:5, which has been compared with the Rekeb, Rekebu, Arapati, maybe, I don't know, Cloud Rider, an epithet of the Ugaritic storm god Baal. So the same language that was used for Baal in Ugaritic text was being used in Psalm 68:5. So Ugaritic is written in a consonantal alphabet with regular indications, without regular indications of vowels, just like every other Shemitic language. This is interesting. There are, however, 3 distinct signs for the glottal stop, the aleph. And okay, like we say, those Hebrew Israelites, a lot of those Hebrew roots make the assertion that the aleph makes an ah sound, but in every Shemitic language, it's a glottal stop. The aleph that differ according to the vowel following the glottal stop, as in al, not, il, God, ul, military force. So even though you have the aleph, it's making an ah, it's making an I, and it's making an U. Now remember, this is close related to biblical Hebrew and early Hebrew. So when they make these claims that Paleo Hebrew or pictographic Hebrew is different than Masoretic text, no, it's been preserved, and there's evidence by looking at earlier texts, earlier cognate texts, or cognate languages of their text, such as the Ugaritic text, and they use the aleph for 3 different vowels. So let's look at this. Most long vowels, as the example above illustrates, are indicated with a macron. Long vowels, long A, ah, long I is a E, long U is a U. Long vowels that are the result of contractions of a diphthong or of 2 vowels, however, are marked with a circumflex, like that. That's like a mater. A mater a mater I, a mater E, a mater O, a mater U. And it's showing you some Ugaritic. Well, no, that's biblical Hebrew. Okay. Here's a picture of the 30 Ugaritic sign, cuneiform sign, cuneiform signs. It's the phonology, the consonants. There's a little chart of a comparison of Ugaritic, Biblical Hebrew, Akkadian, Aramaic, Arab, Ethiopian, Proto-Semitic. But I want to get to this. This is the main thing I want. The main thing I want to get to. All right, let's read just the vowels. As noted in the introduction, Ugaritic is written without indication of the vowels, and our knowledge of the vowels is based on the evidence of words in which aleph occurs. So they like to say that the aleph is always an ah. We've seen that it can be an ah, it can be a e, and it can be a u. Since the three aleph letters do distinguish different vowel qualities, and on the evidence of Ugaritic words that appear in the syllabic cuneiform text, these two lines of evidence indicate that the vowel system of Ugaritic was largely as in classical Arabic, and as generally reconstructed for Proto-Semitic. So they love what did they say? Paleo Hebrew. They love calling it Paleo Hebrew. They love calling pictographic Hebrew, the original Hebrew. But even in Proto-Semitic, when they reconstructed, it has three vowels. Matter of fact, with three short and three long vowels. An a ah, a I, a e, a u, and a u. And they love saying there was no e, there was no, let's say o. I think they say, yeah, there's no o, but o came about from the Canaanite shift. There were also, however, additional vowels. There are additional vowels in the Proto-Semitic. Let me guess, diphthongs that result from the contraction of diphthongs and triphthongs, and from other phonological processes that are described in the following paragraph. All right. Now, what were these vowels? What were these vowels of Aramaic? Of Ugaritic, because Ugaritic and Biblical Hebrew, early Hebrew, were closely, they were like a match. Well, that's the diphthongs. I guess I answered my own question. This is about the diphthongs. Like a diphthong, like bite, where it ends up being two vowels. But here in this first paragraph, I'm not going to go into the diphthongs, and then I'm not going to get into that. It's comparing Akkadian and Proto-Semitic, but right here is showing you that there was three long vowels and three short vowels, and then diphthongs and triphthongs. Okay, I was looking for this vowel chart in here So you have your three. No, it's the historical vowel chart. Hebrew vowels may be arranged into three major categories: A, I, and U, just like Ugaritic. Your long, your short, long, short. These are meters, right? Then your long and short. These are reduced. And your schwas. But I mean, we've looked at a graduate school book. We've looked at a book in Ugaritic. We've looked at the IBH. It's all telling you, for one, this one, I'm glad it said that they were preserving early biblical Hebrew, and it's been found on epigraphic materials. So look, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. You don't really have to believe any of these people. You can be a conspiracy theorist, but like, okay, these books showed you dates. It gave landmarks, where these things were found at. When these Hebrew Israelites, when these Hebrew roots people try to tell you that, the pure form. Oh, I wish I had that. I wish I had that book with me. I had a book that says that early Hebrew has been proven it wasn't syllabic. So it wasn't ba, ga, da, like the Hebrew Israelite camps like to say. They were front, what's that word? I can't remember that word. Like bite, for bait, it was just a B sound. Gimel, it was just a G sound. Like they like to talk about Paleo Hebrew and the pure tongue, but they never give you dates. They never give you evidence because it's not attested. It's never been attested. If they bring that stuff to universities or scholars, grad schools, they'll get laughed at. But, all right, African apes. Catch me swinging.